The night my parents raised their glasses to celebrate 35 years of marriage, they used my divorce as the punchline. And when the entire ballroom laughed, I realized something I had been avoiding my whole life. I was never the daughter they were proud of. I was the lesson they warned people about. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever been embarrassed by your own family, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to protect you? Now let me tell you my story. My name is Olivia Whitmore. I'm 31 years old, and until that night, I thought staying quiet was the same thing as being strong. I grew up in a family where image was everything. My father, Richard Whitmore, owns a financial advisory firm in our town. He built his reputation on discipline, caution, and control. My mother, Linda Whitmore, is the kind of woman who never leaves the house without perfect lipstick and a rehearsed smile. She believes family is a reflection of character. And then there was me. The middle child, not as impressive as my older brother Daniel, who closed real estate deals before most people finished breakfast. Not as graceful as my younger sister Claire, who had been planning her dream wedding since she was 16. I was the emotional one, the romantic one, the one who believed love was enough. At 25, I moved to Chicago for a man named Ryan. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't polished, but he made me laugh in a way that felt like sunlight. My father called him a risk. My mother called him temporary. I married him anyway. For 3 years, I built a life that felt real. A small apartment, late-night takeout, shared dreams. Then I found the messages. Late-night texts from a coworker, hotel receipts, lies layered so carefully I almost admired the effort. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just said, "I didn't think you'd find out." That sentence broke something inside me. The divorce was quiet but brutal. I moved back to my hometown temporarily to regroup, thinking my family would be my safety net. Instead, they treated my heartbreak like a poor financial decision. "Well," my father said one night at dinner, "sometimes experience is the best teacher." My mother added gently, "At least you're still young enough to try again." Try again. Like I had failed an exam. They never asked how it felt to wake up at 3 a.m. gasping for air, because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it dismantles your trust in your own judgment. They just waited for me to recover quietly. So when their 35th anniversary party approached, I considered not attending. But I told myself something hopeful. Maybe this time, they'll see me differently. The event was held at Lakeside Country Club. White roses covered every table. A slideshow of their marriage played on a giant screen, vacations, anniversaries, posed family photos that made us look perfect. I wore a dark emerald dress. Simple, elegant, safe. When my father stood up to give the toast, the room fell silent. He spoke about loyalty, about commitment, about weathering storms together. Then he smiled in my direction. "And of course," he said, lifting his champagne glass, "we're proud of all our children." He gestured toward Daniel. "Our son, who understands the value of smart investments." Polite laughter. "Then Claire, our beautiful daughter about to marry into an incredible family." Applause, then me. "And Olivia," he added with a chuckle, "who reminds us that sometimes life is about trial and error." The room laughed, soft at first, then louder. My stomach dropped. He continued. "She's always had a passionate spirit. Sometimes that means learning lessons the hard way." More laughter. My mother leaned toward the microphone, smiling sweetly. "But we admire her resilience," she said, "even after that little marriage experiment." Marriage experiment. The word echoed in my ears. Experiment, like my pain had been a science project. I scanned the room. Some guests avoided my eyes. Others smiled sympathetically as if this humiliation was harmless. Daniel shook his head, grinning. Claire stared at her glass. And in that moment, something inside me didn't explode. It didn't cry. It went still. Because when humiliation becomes predictable, it stops surprising you. It clarifies you. I had spent years trying to prove I wasn't the family mistake, trying to rebuild my life quietly so they wouldn't feel embarrassed by me. But no amount of quiet success would change the role they had assigned me. I was the cautionary tale, the emotional one, the example of what not to do, so I set my napkin down carefully. No dramatic speech, no tears. I stood up and walked toward the exit. I heard my mother call my name lightly, still smiling for the crowd. Olivia! I didn't turn around. The hallway outside the ballroom was silent compared to the noise behind me. When the doors closed, the laughter disappeared. I stood there for a moment, breathing, not angry, not broken, just clear. I walked to my car, my phone buzzed before I even started the engine. Daniel, seriously, don't make this about you. Claire, you're overreacting. My mother, come back inside. Don't embarrass us. Embarrass us. That's when I realized something painful. They weren't worried about hurting me. They were worried about how my reaction looked. I drove home in silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry over what they said. I cried because I finally understood my place in their story, and I didn't want that role anymore. By the next morning, I had made a decision. If they wanted a joke, I would remove the audience. I blocked the family group chat. I ignored the missed calls. Within a week, I accepted a consulting offer in Seattle, a contract I had been hesitating to take. I didn't tell them I was moving. I packed my apartment quietly. No goodbye dinner, no explanations. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't argue. It's disappear. What I didn't know then was this. My silence would bother them more than any confrontation ever could. And 3 months after I left, they would try to pull me back in a way I never expected. But this time, I wouldn't be walking into a ballroom as the punchline. I would be walking back as something they didn't know how to control. Seattle didn't care that I was the daughter who learned lessons the hard way. It didn't know about the ballroom. It didn't laugh, it just gave me space. And in that space, I rebuilt myself. The consulting contract I accepted was with a mid-sized tech startup that had potential but no direction. Their branding was inconsistent. Their investor confidence was shaky. Internally, leadership didn't trust each other. It felt familiar. I didn't try to impress anyone at first. I observed. I listened. I studied the gaps in their strategy the same way I had studied the cracks in my own life. Where were they undervaluing themselves? Where were they overcompensating? Where were they afraid to admit weakness? When I finally presented my restructuring plan, the room went quiet. Not polite quiet, focused quiet. By the end of that quarter, their numbers stabilized. By the end of the year, they offered me equity. For the first time in my life, my name carried weight without explanation. I wasn't someone's daughter. I wasn't someone's ex-wife. I was Olivia Whitmore, strategic partner. I didn't tell my family. I didn't post on social media. Silence became my boundary. But silence has a way of making people curious, especially people who are used to controlling the narrative. 3 months after I moved, I received a LinkedIn notification. Connection request, Richard Whitmore, no message, just the request. I declined it. 10 minutes later, Daniel called. "So you're too important to connect with Dad now?" he asked. I was sitting in my office overlooking a gray skyline, rain sliding down the windows. "I keep my professional life separate," I replied calmly. He scoffed. "He's just proud of you." "Is he?" I asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. "Look, he saw an article about your company. It mentioned leadership restructuring. He thinks maybe he could advise." There it was, advise. My father didn't give advice. He took control. "I'm not looking for advisors," I said. "You're being dramatic." I almost laughed. Dramatic would have been standing up at the anniversary and telling everyone how that joke felt, I said. "This is restraint." He didn't respond. He just sighed like I was exhausting. A week later, I found out how far my father's concern extended. One of our investors forwarded me an email. Subject line, due diligence clarification. The sender was my father. In the email, he politely questioned whether I was emotionally stable enough to manage growth capital, referencing recent personal volatility. Personal volatility. He meant my divorce. He had framed my heartbreak as a professional liability. My chest didn't burn. It went cold. This wasn't teasing. This wasn't an insensitive joke. This was sabotage. He hadn't asked me about my work. He hadn't congratulated me. He had quietly tried to cast doubt on my credibility, because if he couldn't control my success, he could question it. I sat in my office long after everyone left that night. For a brief moment, I considered ignoring it, handling it quietly, protecting the illusion of family harmony. Then I remembered the ballroom, the laughter, the word experiment, and I realized something. Silence protects people who hurt you. Boundaries protect you. I forwarded the email to our legal advisor. Within 48 hours, my father received a formal cease and desist letter instructing him to refrain from contacting business associates regarding my personal history. The phone call came within minutes. "How dare you threaten your own father?" he demanded. His voice wasn't calm. It wasn't strategic. It was angry. "How dare you question my professional stability?" I replied evenly. "I was protecting you." "From what?" I asked. "Independence." There was a long pause. "You've changed," he said finally. "Yes," I answered softly. "I have." He hung up. "Claire texted me that night. You didn't have to embarrass him like that." I stared at the message. Embarrass him. The irony almost made me smile. For years, I had absorbed embarrassment quietly. Now that it was his turn to feel exposed, it was suddenly unacceptable. Weeks passed. No calls, no attempts to fix it, just distance. And in that distance, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. Because revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like refusing to be diminished. Our company continued to grow. We secured a partnership that nearly doubled our valuation. My name began appearing in industry newsletters, attached to words like visionary and decisive. Then one evening, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Cream cardstock, elegant calligraphy. "Claire Whitmore and Ethan Collins request the honor of your presence, her wedding." No handwritten note. No acknowledgement of the legal letter. No apology, just an invitation. I held it in my hands for a long time. They wanted me visible again, not because they understood me. Because they needed the image intact. I could already imagine the photographer arranging us, parents in the center, successful son, perfect bride. And me, the reclaimed daughter, standing neatly in place. But something had shifted. If I attended, it wouldn't be as the insecure middle child hoping for approval. It would be as someone who understood her worth. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't absence. It's presence when they realize they no longer intimidate you. 3 days before the RSVP deadline, I mailed the card back. "Accepts with pleasure." What they didn't know was this. By the time I walked into that wedding, the balance of power in our family would already be changing. And the person they thought they could control would finally be untouchable.